It only takes one moment, one outburst, one poor decision, one public scene to shake the foundation of a family's dignity. And when it involves a child, especially the child of someone powerful or well-known, that moment doesn't just ripple, it explodes. That's what happened when McGregor's son was kicked out of a mall. And more than the incident itself, what caught everyone off guard was the father's reaction. Now, let's pause. Strip away the headlines. Forget the name, the fame, the cameras. At its core, this is about something deeper. What does it mean to be a father when your child stumbles in public? And what does it mean to be a man, a role model, when the world is watching and waiting even also to see you break? For many parents, especially fathers raised in the emotionally stoic traditions of the past, a child's mistake in public feels like a direct blow to their identity. It's not just embarrassment. It's the voice that whispers, "You failed." In McGregor's case, the world expected rage, punishment, a loud defense of his family's name. After all, he's known for fire, for fighting, but instead, there was stillness. His reaction left everyone speechless. Why? Because when a man who is known for aggression chooses reflection over retaliation, people notice. And when a father decides that his child's error is not a crisis, but a crossroad, a moment to teach, not punish, he challenges everything we think we know about masculinity. This chapter isn't about celebrity gossip. It's about you and the men you've known, fathers, brothers, husbands, who faced moments like these. Maybe your son was caught shoplifting. Maybe your daughter screamed back at a teacher. Maybe you stood frozen, unsure whether to yell, defend, cry, or stay silent. That moment, that is the crucible of modern parenthood. And yet, the real story begins with the response. McGregor didn't storm into the mall. He didn't make a spectacle. He didn't try to save face. Instead, witnesses say, he placed his hand on his son's shoulder and said something few could hear. But the tone was unmistakable. Calm, firm, human. What if, in that quiet response, he modeled the kind of strength that doesn't need to roar? As we dive into the next chapters, we'll explore what this moment reveals about emotional legacy, male pride, intergenerational pressure, and the fear all parents feel when their child becomes a reflection they don't recognize. Sometimes the greatest show of power is restraint. There's a peculiar kind of pressure that comes with carrying a name that holds weight. It doesn't matter if that weight comes from fame, fortune, or family expectations. For the child, it feels like a mantle they never asked to wear. And for the parent, it becomes a question of legacy. What have I passed on? Values or shadows? When McGregor's son was escorted out of that mall, many immediately pointed fingers at the father's image. Of course, they said. Look at his dad. Aggressive, loud, combative. It's easy to trace a straight line from a child's misstep to the parent's reputation. But is it fair? In psychology, there's a term, intergenerational transmission. It refers to the ways behaviors, beliefs, and emotional patterns are passed down through families, often unconsciously. A father who handles conflict with fists or fury may raise a child who learns the same. But here's the catch. Sometimes, the child rebels not against the world, but against the legacy itself. A misbehavior can be a cry for distance, for individuality, a desperate attempt to say, I am not just my father's son. Now pause for a moment. Think about the generational stories in your own life. Maybe your father never spoke about emotions. Maybe his father before him believed love was shown through discipline, not tenderness. And maybe, without even realizing it, you began to question whether you were raising your own children in that same image, or breaking free from it. When McGregor responded with calm, he disrupted a pattern. He made a decision that day, to teach instead of dominate, to pause instead of explode. And whether or not his son understood it in the moment, something powerful was passed down. Not just a reaction, but a model for how to be a man in moments of chaos. Let's be honest, public embarrassment stings deeper than private disappointment. When your child acts out in front of others, it doesn't just challenge your parenting, it threatens your identity. But those moments, though brutal, are also sacred. They are invitations to grow, not just for the child, for the parent too. In a society where many men over 45 were raised to equate control with respect and silence with strength, this kind of emotional honesty can feel foreign, uncomfortable, even weak, but it's not. In fact, it may be the most courageous thing a father can do. Respond with humility instead of ego. The truth is, our children don't just inherit our names, they inherit our silences, our anger, our tenderness, and our choices. So when McGregor stood in that mall, faced with judgment and cameras, and chose to steady rather than shout, he wasn't just reacting, he was rewriting. There's a reason anger feels powerful. It gives us a rush, a sense of control. It drowns out shame, masks fear, and gives us something to do when we feel helpless. For generations of men, especially those raised in tough environments or emotionally reserved homes, anger wasn't just allowed, it was expected. It became the primary language of pain. That's why McGregor's reputation for fire and aggression never surprised people. It fit the mold. But in that mall incident, what shocked everyone was what didn't happen. No public fury, no defense, no red-faced yelling, just quiet, just presence, and maybe just a man trying to do better. Here's the truth. It takes far more strength to pause and reflect than it does to explode. And that's especially true when your ego is on the line, when your child is involved. You see, rage is easy because it protects us from vulnerability, from being seen as weak, from the painful possibility that our child's actions might reveal something about us we're not ready to confront. But reflection, that means facing the deeper question, what am I feeling and why? Let's bring it home. Maybe you've been in that position. Your son raised his voice at a family dinner. Your daughter skipped school and lied about it. Your grandchild came home with a story that made your blood boil. And your first instinct? Shame, anger, blame. Because you were raised to believe that respect is non-negotiable, that to tolerate misbehavior is to lose control. But what if the real strength isn't in the reaction? It's in the regulation. The mall incident is more than tabloid bait. It's a mirror. It asks every parent, especially fathers, to look at how they respond when their authority feels threatened. Do they lead with fear or with presence? There's a moment many missed in that story. After McGregor placed his hand on his son's shoulder, he didn't lecture. He didn't posture. He reportedly said, "We'll talk about this at home." It's such a simple sentence, but beneath it lies wisdom. It tells the child, "I see you. I'm not ignoring this. But I will not turn this into a spectacle. You're more than your mistake." That is the hard work of parenting. Not to react with the emotion that rises first, but to choose the one that heals. Especially for older adults who are taught to hide emotion and show toughness, this shift toward conscious parenting can feel like walking uphill. But it matters, not just for your child, for you. Because every time you choose reflection over rage, you reclaim a part of yourself that never got to be soft, never got to be safe, and that's where real change begins. In quiet choices, there is perhaps no greater trigger for unresolved pain than seeing your child reflect the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime hiding. A child doesn't just carry your name, they carry your emotional imprint. And when that imprint surfaces in public, the impact is raw. What happened in that mall wasn't just a child being disruptive. For many parents watching, it touched a nerve. What do I do when my child becomes the mirror of my worst fears? Psychologists often speak of projection, the unconscious process where we place parts of ourselves we can't accept onto others. This happens in relationships, but it happens most intensely with our children. A father who struggled with impulsiveness may see his son act out and feel disproportionate anger, not because of the act itself, but because it reopens a wound. This is why parenting can be so painful. Your child doesn't just disobey. They awaken the shame you buried, the shame of your own past mistakes, the temper you inherited, the emotional distance you never bridged. And when that mirror is held up in public, it feels unbearable. That's why McGregor's restraint wasn't just unusual, it was revolutionary. In that moment, he didn't react to the reflection, he accepted it. And in doing so, he gave space for growth, for both of them. Think about it in your own life. Have you ever felt shame, not just for your child's actions, but for what it might reveal about your parenting? Or worse, for what it reminds you of in yourself? Perhaps your son is quick to anger, like you once were. Maybe your daughter avoids conflict, the way you learned to in your own youth. And when these traits show up, the temptation is to correct them harshly, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear that the past is repeating, that you haven't done enough to change the story. But here's the thing. The mirror isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. When McGregor looked at his son that day, he may have seen himself, the defiance, the fire, the same restless energy that made him who he is. And instead of silencing it, he chose to channel it, to guide it rather than punish it. This kind of emotional intelligence isn't common among men raised in environments where strength was measured by silence. But emotional maturity isn't about age, it's about awareness, and it begins when we stop fearing the mirror. Your child is not your shame. They are your evolution. Each time they stumble, you have a choice: to react from the wounded past or respond from the healing present. McGregor didn't just avoid a scene, he accepted the reflection. And in doing so, he broke a cycle. There's a lie many of us carry, quietly, heavily. If I had done everything right, my child wouldn't have made that mistake. It's the myth of the perfect parent, a belief deeply ingrained, especially in those who were raised to equate discipline with worth and obedience with love. But life doesn't work that way. Children are not blank slates we write on. They are individuals with their own wills, fears, impulses, and choices. And no matter how well we parent, they will still fall, fail, and sometimes embarrass us. When McGregor's son was escorted out of that mall, the public reaction was swift. Many didn't just question the boy, they condemned the father. "Look at how he was raised," they said, as if one moment of rebellion was the final proof of failed parenting. But that mindset is both cruel and false, because the truth is, parenting isn't about control. It's about presence. It's about showing up, again and again, even when your child acts in ways you don't understand or even recognize. It's about being the steady hand when they are spinning out. And most of all, it's about understanding that mistakes are not reflections of failure, but opportunities for relationship. Let's speak directly to those parents in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. The ones who grew up in homes where a single wrong move could mean shame, silence, or punishment. You were taught that a good child was quiet, compliant, respectful. And when your child breaks those rules, it feels like they're breaking you. But here's the deeper truth. Good parenting has nothing to do with public perfection. It has everything to do with what happens after the fall, after the outburst, after the mall security steps in and the crowd starts watching. McGregor's quiet reaction shattered the myth of perfection. He didn't defend, he didn't deflect, he didn't pretend. He accepted what happened, and he stood beside his son with calm presence. Not because he was okay with the behavior, but because he understood. The child needed connection more than correction. That's a difficult pill to swallow, especially for those who were raised in environments where mistakes were met with punishment, not patience. But breaking that cycle means understanding that imperfection is not failure. It's human. It's how we learn. It's how our children grow into adults who know how to repair, not just perform. Ask yourself, when your child misbehaves, is your first thought, "What will people think?" or "What does my child need?" That answer reveals which myth you're still serving. No parent gets it right all the time, not even those in the spotlight. But the ones who are willing to grow alongside their children, to let go of perfection and embrace presence, those are the ones who leave a lasting legacy, not of power, but of love. There's a unique kind of pressure that comes when your private life becomes public, when your parenting is on display not just to family and friends, but to strangers, cameras, and critics. In today's world, that pressure isn't reserved for celebrities. Every parent with a smartphone in their hand knows what it feels like to be recorded, judged, and shamed in real time. That's what made McGregor's mall moment so tense. Not just because his son misbehaved, but because everyone saw it. And for a man who built a career on dominance and defiance, the world expected a show. But he didn't perform. He parented. This raises a difficult but important question. Who are we when the world is watching? Do we lead with ego, protecting our image at all costs? Or do we lead with integrity, even if it makes us look vulnerable? For parents over 45, many of whom grew up before the age of social media and surveillance, this reality can be jarring. Back then, discipline happened behind closed doors. Now a meltdown in a grocery store can go viral within minutes. The result? A constant pressure to prove your competence, not just as a parent, but as a person. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You don't owe the world a performance. You owe your child your attention, your steadiness, your truth. McGregor's choice that day may have seemed small, a hand on the shoulder, a quiet word. But in the context of a public arena, it was radical. It said, "I see you, I see my son, and I choose to respond to him, not to the cameras." That's the kind of presence our children desperately need, especially when they mess up. Because the moment a child feels like a stage prop in their parent's performance, the relationship begins to crack. They stop showing vulnerability. They start hiding. And what they need most in their moments of failure, compassion, structure, understanding, gets replaced by a parent trying to save face. This is especially hard for men who were taught that being respected meant being feared. That losing control has even for a second meant losing honor. But the real measure of strength isn't how loud you are when the world is watching. It's how grounded you are when your child is struggling. Presence over pride, connection over control. That's what McGregor modeled, intentionally or not, in that moment. And that's what every parent is invited to remember. Even under the brightest spotlight, you still get to choose your response. You still get to be a parent, not a performer. The world may be watching, but your child is watching more closely. In the end, parenting is not defined by birthdays, graduations, or perfectly posed family photos. It's shaped, sometimes forever, by the quiet, difficult moments no one prepares us for. The mall incident with McGregor's son will fade from headlines, but what won't fade is the emotional memory it created for that boy. That moment, however brief, becomes a thread in the fabric of his understanding of manhood, forgiveness, and love. Legacy is not what you leave behind when you die. Legacy is what you hand down while you're still alive. For fathers especially, and for men who were raised to believe their value lies in strength, performance, or providing, the invitation to build a different kind of legacy often comes later in life. It comes when the performance starts to feel hollow, when the silence between you and your child grows louder than your pride. When life slows down just enough for you to ask, what kind of man do I want my children to remember? In that mall, McGregor could have reinforced the image the world already had of him: explosive, dominant, reactive. But instead, he chose something else. Maybe not because he planned it. Maybe just because in that fleeting moment, his instincts shifted. He saw the child, not the embarrassment. He saw the lesson, not the threat. That choice, calm over chaos, connection over control, is what builds emotional legacy. And it's not just reserved for the famous or the powerful. It's built by fathers and mothers in parking lots, school hallways, quiet bedrooms at night. It's built when you say, "I'm disappointed, but I'm still here." When you look at your child's worst moment and refuse to make it the end of the story. To the parents in midlife, those navigating estranged relationships, grown children with unresolved wounds, or younger kids still testing boundaries, know this: it's not too late. Emotional legacy isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about showing up after the mistake, not just before it. It's about repair. McGregor's public moment reminds us of something deeper. Your child will remember how you made them feel when they were at their lowest. Did you meet them with shame or with humanity? And your answer to that question, more than your rules, your achievements, or your public image, becomes your true legacy. So maybe this isn't a story about a mall or about McGregor. Maybe it's a story about all of us, about the kind of parents we still have time to become, about the kind of men we want to be remembered as. In the end, the world may never know what McGregor whispered to his son that day. But maybe, just maybe, it was something like, "You are more than your mistake, and I will love you through this."